Welcome to this deep dive all about Alcmaeon of Croton. We're going to be taking a look at some fascinating ideas from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, all about this kind of mysterious guy in early Greek thought.
Mm.
He was a philosopher, maybe a physician too, and lived around 500 BCE.
Okay.
What's really cool is how Alcmaeon looked into questions about the human body and soul, even knowledge itself.
It's like he's setting the stage for both science and philosophy as we know them now.
Exactly, and I think you'll find this deep dive particularly interesting as a philosophy fan.
Oh, for sure.
Right away, we hit a mystery.
Oh.
The sources are unclear if Alcmaeon was a practicing physician or primarily a philosopher.
Really?
Yeah, some ancient texts mention his medical writings, but others call him a philosopher-scientist.
Ah, interesting.
And get this, even his connection to the Pythagoreans is debated.
Oh, wow.
Was he a student of Pythagoras or just inspired by Pythagorean thought? We may never know for sure.
It's like trying to put together a puzzle and some pieces are just gone.
Right. And to make it even harder, pinning down his exact dates is tricky.
I bet.
Scholars generally place him in the early 5th century BCE,
Okay.
which makes his ideas even more impressive considering the limited scientific knowledge back then.
I can imagine.
So let's get into those ideas.
Okay.
What I found really striking is how Alcmaeon starts his book with this big statement: humans can't know everything with absolute certainty. It's as if he's acknowledging the limits of human perception and understanding from the very beginning.
So crucial to his philosophy, Alcmaeon knew we can't have perfect knowledge of things beyond our senses.
Right.
But, and this is key, he didn't just become a skeptic.
Okay.
He argued that we can still make reasonable judgments based on what we experience with our senses.
I see.
This emphasis on observation and evidence is what makes him such a philosophical pioneer.
It's fascinating how he's laying the groundwork for empirical investigation. You know, the idea of looking at the world around us and drawing conclusions based on what we see.
Exactly. He's not just relying on abstract reasoning or divine revelation.
Right.
He's saying, let's look at the evidence, let's use our senses to figure out how things work, and this approach is perfectly shown in his work on the brain.
Oh, yeah.
Alcmaeon was the first to identify the brain as the central organ for both sensation and thought, centuries before modern neuroscience.
That's what blew me away. Not only did he figure out the brain is the command center, but he also described channels connecting the sensory organs to the brain, what we call nerves. How do you think he came to these conclusions?
Well, if there's evidence that suggests he did dissections, although not as systematically as later anatomists.
I see.
Like he described seeing channels going from the eye to the brain after dissecting an animal's eyeball.
Wow.
His methods may have been basic, but his insights were revolutionary for his time.
It's a testament to his curiosity and his willingness to go against conventional wisdom.
Definitely.
He wasn't afraid to get his hands dirty, so to speak, and explore the physical world to understand how it all works.
And his insights went beyond anatomy. He also got into the realm of the soul, suggesting one of the earliest arguments for its immortality.
This is where things get really interesting from a philosophical view.
Right.
How did he argue for the soul's immortality?
It all hinges on the idea of perpetual motion.
Okay.
He said that the soul is always moving, and anything that's in perpetual motion can't stop existing. It's a beautiful argument, but it might not convince every skeptic out there.
Yeah, it definitely raises some interesting questions.
Yeah.
Makes me think about consciousness, you know, whether it's something that truly exists beyond our physical bodies.
Exactly. Alcmaeon's argument might not give us all the answers,
Right.
but it does open a whole new path for philosophical exploration.
For sure.
He saw the soul as the source of movement, an idea that would really influence later philosophers like Plato.
And it wasn't just the soul that he saw in constant motion. He was also fascinated by the natural world, animals, plants, planets. And he used comparisons from nature to explain the human body. For instance, he compared pubic hair growing to plants flowering.
That's such a vivid image, and it shows Alcmaeon's holistic view of the cosmos.
Right.
He's basically saying, we're not separate from nature, but a part of it.
Yeah.
We share the same basic patterns and processes as other living things.
It's like he's anticipating modern ecological thinking, emphasizing how everything's connected.
Right, and this leads us to another cool part of Alcmaeon's thoughts, his understanding of health and disease.
Right.
He used a political metaphor to explain these ideas, which I think you'll find pretty interesting.
I'm all ears. Tell me more about this political metaphor.
Well, Alcmaeon believed that health stays strong when opposite forces in the body, like hot and cold, wet and dry, are balanced.
Uh-huh.
He called this balance isonomia, a term usually used for a well-run state.
So he's making a parallel between a healthy body and a society that's governed well.
Exactly. And on the flip side, he thought illness happens when one of these forces takes over, messing up the harmony in the body. He compared this imbalance to monarchia or tyranny.
Wow.
It's like he's saying that just as unchecked power can wreck a society, an imbalance in the body can lead to sickness.
That's a powerful comparison, and it makes you think about the importance of balance in every part of life.
Totally.
It's like he's predicting modern ideas about holistic health and well-being.
Absolutely. Alcmaeon's metaphor reminds us that health isn't just about not being sick.
Right.
It's about a harmonious balance within our bodies and minds.
It's a perspective that feels so relevant these days when so many of us are struggling to find balance in this crazy busy world.
For sure, Alcmaeon's wisdom from so long ago reminds us that true well-being comes from creating harmony within us and in how we interact with the world.
This deep dive has been super enlightening, showing us Alcmaeon's groundbreaking ideas and his lasting impact.
He was ahead of his time.
His work proves the power of philosophy to explore what it means to be human and to find links between things that seem totally different: the body, the soul, the cosmos, even political systems.
It really is amazing how much his thinking still resonates with us today.
It really makes you realize that even though our scientific tools and methods have come a long way, the fundamental questions about who we are and how we fit into the universe haven't changed.
Exactly. And Alcmaeon, with his bold statements and willingness to question traditional thinking, shows how philosophy can help us understand ourselves and the world around us better.
It's clear that Alcmaeon was a visionary thinker, way ahead of his time.
For sure.
His work set the stage for scientific and philosophical exploration that continues today, and his ideas make us think differently about ourselves and the world.
Definitely.
I'm really interested in digging deeper into some of his key ideas, particularly about the soul, and his cool use of political comparisons for health and disease.
Those are great areas to explore.
Yeah.
Alcmaeon's insights into these things give us a unique glimpse into the intellectual world of ancient Greece, and they bring up questions that are still relevant today.
Absolutely. I'm excited to continue this journey with you and see where it leads. I'm ready to dive back in and learn even more about Alcmaeon of Croton. Stick around for part 2, where we'll explore his ideas about the soul and his unique take on health and disease.
Picking up where we left off, let's look closer at Alcmaeon's argument for the soul's immortality.
Okay.
His reasoning focuses on the idea of perpetual motion, something he observed not only in the soul but also in the celestial bodies.
So he saw a link between how the soul moves and the never-ending movements of the cosmos.
Exactly. He observed that the planets, stars, the whole universe are constantly in motion.
Wow.
Just like the heavenly bodies keep going in their orbits, the soul keeps going because of its perpetual motion.
It's like he's saying that the soul is part of the universe's fabric taking part in this eternal dance.
That's a beautiful way to put it. It shows Alcmaeon's holistic view where human experience isn't separate from the grand scheme of the universe.
Right.
Now, his argument might not hold up to modern philosophical scrutiny,
Yeah, I can see that.
but it does reveal a perceptive intuition about what consciousness is and its potential to exist outside the physical body.
It's a pretty bold and thought-provoking idea for someone living in ancient Greece.
It really is.
It speaks to that human desire for something more than just the finite, for a connection to something bigger than ourselves.
Totally. It gets at those fundamental questions that have fascinated philosophers for ages.
Right.
What is consciousness? What happens when we die? Those questions still resonate with us now.
It really makes you realize that even though we've made huge strides in science since Alcmaeon's time, these core philosophical questions about our existence are still just as relevant and mysterious.
It speaks to how powerful these questions are and the human need to grapple with them. Alcmaeon, despite the limits of his era, dared to explore these huge concepts,
Yeah.
paving the way for future philosophers and thinkers.
Now, moving to something different, but just as interesting about Alcmaeon's thought, I'd like to hear more about his use of political metaphors to describe health and disease.
Okay, sure.
It struck me as such a unique and insightful approach.
It is, and as a philosopher, I think you'll appreciate the depth and nuance of his thinking here. Remember how he used the word isonomia,
Yes.
meaning equality or balance, to describe health?
Yes. It's as if he saw the body as a small-scale version of a well-governed state where all the different parts and functions are working together in harmony.
Exactly. He believed that when the opposing forces inside the body, hot and cold, wet and dry, and so on, are in equilibrium, the body flourishes.
Okay.
It's like a well-functioning democracy where power is shared and there's cooperation.
Uh-huh.
The body also needs this delicate balance.
So when that balance is messed up, when one force takes over, that's when illness shows up.
Exactly. Alcmaeon compared this imbalance to monarchia or tyranny.
Oh, wow.
Imagine a ruler who grabs all the power, shuts down any opposition, and disrupts everything.
Right.
It's similar when one force in the body takes too much control, it throws off the harmony, and that leads to dysfunction and disease.
So that's a really strong analogy. Maybe you should think about how the idea of balance applies not just to physical health, but to everything in life.
For sure.
It connects with modern ideas about holistic well-being, acknowledging how our physical, mental, even social states are all linked.
I completely agree. Alcmaeon's metaphor reminds us that looking for balance in our diets, our lifestyles, our relationships is key to a healthy and fulfilling life.
It makes a lot of sense.
It's about creating a state of equilibrium within ourselves and in how we connect with the world around us.
It's a perspective that feels so relevant today when so many of us struggle to find balance in such a fast-paced and demanding world.
Absolutely. Alcmaeon's wisdom from centuries ago is a timeless reminder that true well-being comes from cultivating harmony, both within ourselves and in our connection with the world.
This deep dive has been so insightful. It's really shed light on Alcmaeon's groundbreaking ideas and his lasting influence.
He was ahead of his time.
His work shows how powerful philosophical inquiry is for exploring what it means to be human and for finding connections between things that seem totally different, like the body, the soul, the cosmos, even political systems.
He was a true visionary, pushing the limits of knowledge and going against conventional thinking in a way that still inspires us now.
As we head toward the last part of this deep dive, I'm especially curious to explore Alcmaeon's epistemology, his thoughts about the nature of knowledge, and the limits of what we can understand as humans.
Okay.
Especially since we know we can't achieve perfect knowledge. How do we even make sense of the world around us?
That's a great transition into our next discussion. Alcmaeon's approach to knowledge, while acknowledging its inherent limits, offers valuable insights into how we can navigate a world that's full of complexity and uncertainty.
I'm excited to dive deeper into that. It feels so relevant now where we're constantly bombarded with information and misinformation.
Right.
How do we sort through all that noise and arrive at a solid understanding of the world?
Alcmaeon's focus on empirical observation, making reasoned judgments, and having a good amount of intellectual humility gives us a guide for dealing with this complicated situation.
I can't wait to explore that more in our last part. Stick with us as we keep going with our deep dive into the fascinating world of Alcmaeon of Croton. Welcome back to our deep dive on Alcmaeon of Croton. We've talked about his groundbreaking ideas about the brain, the soul, and even his fascinating comparison of health to political systems.
Yeah, and now we get to the foundation of it all. How did Alcmaeon think we actually know anything? His epistemology, his theory of knowledge is surprisingly relevant even today.
Especially since he emphasized observing and using our senses, but he also said we can't have perfect knowledge. So how do those two ideas work together?
It's a tricky balance. That's what makes his philosophy so interesting.
Right.
Alcmaeon recognized way back in the 5th century BCE that our senses are essential but imperfect.
Yeah.
We can't perceive everything, and what we think we see can be affected by lots of things.
So he's not saying we should blindly trust our senses.
Nope, not at all. He's saying we need a careful and reasoned approach to knowledge. He thought that even though we can't be absolutely sure about the world beyond our senses, we can still make reasonable judgments based on what we observe.
I see.
It's like he's setting the stage for the scientific method, the idea of making guesses based on what we see, testing those guesses, and changing our understanding as we gather more evidence.
That's a great point. It shows how Alcmaeon was way ahead of his time in how he thought about knowledge. He really emphasized collecting data, considering different views, and being open to changing our minds when new evidence comes up.
And that's so important today, right?
Yeah.
With so much information out there, it's easy to get stuck in our ways or to believe sources without questioning them.
It really is.
Alcmaeon reminds us to think critically, to evaluate the information we come across, and be careful of claims that aren't based on solid evidence. He encourages a healthy amount of skepticism without going too far into cynicism or distrusting all knowledge.
Yeah, his approach is like a good balance against the extremes of blind faith and total skepticism. It's about finding that middle ground where we admit that we don't know everything, but we still try to understand the world around us using reason and evidence.
Exactly. It's about having intellectual humility, knowing that we don't have all the answers, and that our understanding is always growing.
I think that's a powerful message for everyone, especially those of us who like to explore complex topics.
Absolutely. And remember, Alcmaeon's idea about knowledge is connected to his other ideas. His emphasis on observation and evidence is what led him to his amazing work on the brain and his study of the soul.
So it all comes back to that main idea. Let's look at the world, let's gather proof, let's use reason to figure it all out. But let's also admit that our understanding is always a work in progress.
Yeah, it's a perspective that can make our philosophical understanding richer, but also change how we approach life itself.
This deep dive into Alcmaeon's world has been amazing. It's incredible how a thinker from over 2,500 years ago can still give us such relevant ideas for understanding the world and our place in it. His focus on balanced observation and reasoned judgment feels so relevant today.
It's a testament to the power of philosophy and to Alcmaeon's unique brilliance. His work pushes us to think deeply, question what we believe, and approach knowledge with curiosity and humility.
As we wrap up, I'd like to leave our listeners with this core. Alcmaeon believed that the soul was in perpetual motion. What does that mean to you if our minds are always seeking exploring, questioning where will your intellectual journey take you next time around? Keep asking questions, keep exploring, and until next time, happy deep diving.